Hi, my name is Bob Sternberg, and it's a pleasure to be with you here today by video. First, I want to apologize for not being there in person. In addition to being Provost and Senior Vice President of the university, I also have one-year-old triplets, so I try as much as possible to minimize my travel. Second, I want to say that when I visited Dublin, it was one of the best trips I've ever taken, so I'm especially sorry not to be there. And third, I thought I would just say a little bit about my background. I'm currently Provost and Senior Vice President of Oklahoma State University. I started my academic career as an undergraduate at Yale University, majoring in psychology. And after graduating, I took a job as special assistant to the Dean of Undergraduate Admissions at Yale, where I had worked part-time as an undergraduate. After that, I went to Stanford University for a PhD in psychology, and following 3 years there, I went back to Yale and started as an assistant professor and stayed there 30 years, ending as IBM Professor of Psychology and Education, Professor of Management, and Director of the Center for the Psychology of Abilities, Competencies, and Expertise. After that, I went to Tufts University near Boston, Massachusetts, as Dean of the School of Arts and Sciences, and I'm now here as Provost and Senior Vice President at Oklahoma State. So, what got me interested in admissions originally was my concern that we're doing it in some respects wrong. And here's why I think we're doing it wrong in some respects. If you look at the current economic crisis in Europe, including, and some might say especially in Ireland, and you look at the economic problems in the United States, as well as the political problems in my own country, in a country where one candidate has a degree from Harvard, another candidate has 2 degrees from Harvard, another candidate's a former college professor, another candidate is a doctor. All of these are candidates for the current presidency. One begins to worry that if all these people have such great degrees in Europe, the United States, and other places, and if they've been educated so well, and if they're so smart in a conventional sense, how has the world gotten into the messes it's in today? In the United States, the failed banks like Lehman Brothers recruited only at the very top universities in the country, and yet the management was so bad the banks failed. So what is missing? What I've argued is missing is that we're selecting students for rather narrow academic skills, and that these skills in themselves are not broad enough, they're not sufficiently adequate for success in everyday life. And success in the sense of what I believe a university education is about, and that is educating students who will make the world a better place, which is to say active citizens and leaders who will make a positive, meaningful, and enduring difference to the world. So I began to think of ways in which we might better admit students that would look at a broader range of characteristics, and my work was motivated by what I've come to call a theory of successful intelligence. And in the theory, the idea is that active citizens and leaders need creative skills in order to generate a vision and to adapt to novel circumstances and to prepare for a rapidly changing world. They need analytical skills in order to ascertain whether their creative ideas are actually good ones, because there are any number of leaders who have what they believe to be creative ideas. They just happen to be bad ideas. Hitler and Stalin come to mind. They need practical skills in order to be able to implement their ideas and to persuade others of the value of those ideas. And they need wisdom-based skills in order to ensure that their ideas help to promote a common good by balancing their own, others, and higher interests over the long and short terms through the infusion of positive ethical values. So, In my later years at Yale, we devised a project called the Rainbow Project. And this project, as well as the subsequent projects I'm going to describe, are discussed in my book, College Admissions for the 21st Century, published by Harvard University Press in 2010. And the idea of our rainbow assessment at Yale was to measure, in addition to the analytical abilities and knowledge assessed by tests in the United States, like the SAT, or perhaps in the United Kingdom, by comparable tests that would more measure achievement-based outcomes, A-levels or whatever, we would need, in addition, to measure creative and practical skills. At that point, in the early 2000s, wisdom had not yet been added to my theory. So we devised measures of creative, analytical, and practical thinking, and we administered them to about 1,000 high school seniors and first-year university students all around the country. So this covered much of the United States, and it had men and women, and some schools were not so selective, some were fairly selective, some were highly selective. It had members of different ethnic groups, and so on. So analytical items would be more like those you would find on an IQ test. You might be asked what word would fit, what the meaning of a word is in a sentence that was a neologism, so you have to figure out the meaning of the word. Or you might have number series, or you might have figural matrices you have to complete. Creative items might be, for example, to write a story with a title like Beyond the Edge, or The Octopus's Sneakers, or 6,321. Or you might see a visual collage, including, say, athletes or perhaps musicians, and you would have to orally tell a story, a creative story, about the visual collage. Or another creative item might be to get a New Yorker type cartoon, and you would have to caption it. Practical items presented either common everyday situations that students encountered in college or in the workplace, and the students were asked how they would resolve the problem situations they were presented with, or they were shown movies of situations facing college students, and they had to say what they would do in the problem presented. So for example, one might show a student walking into a professor's office. He's about to ask for a letter of recommendation from the professor. The professor looks up from the desk, and it's clear the professor doesn't know who the student is. Or another one shows students trying to move a bed up a winding staircase, and it's obvious the bed won't fit up the winding staircase, so they have to figure out how to get the bed upstairs. And another, students are arguing about how to divide payments of a rental flat where the rooms are of different sizes in which the students sleep. So what we found in the Rainbow study is, first, that we could separate out factorially, which is a statistical technique that looks at psychological antecedents of how students perform on tests. We could separate out a creative factor, a practical factor, and the third factor, which was supposed to be analytical, was really multiple choice items. All multiple choice items loaded on the analytical factor. So what we discovered is that multiple choice items don't work to measure creative or practical skills. But we got a creative, practical, and multiple choice / analytical factor, more or less as the theory predicted. We also found that using our rainbow measures, we could double prediction of first-year academic average over what we would gain from the SAT, our college admissions test alone, or we could increase prediction by 50% over looking at just high school grades and this SAT. So we got good structure for the test, and we roughly doubled prediction over standardized tests, which would be not so dissimilar to the A-levels in the UK. Finally, we found that we reduced ethnic group differences roughly by about half or slightly more using our tests. In other words, although we increased prediction, we actually decreased ethnic group differences. In other words, our tests were measuring variation. that was relevant to to success in college, that was not being picked up by our college admissions test, the SAT, and so it was predicting success in college. So after that, I went to Tufts as Dean of Arts and Sciences, and there we initiated a project called Kaleidoscope. And instead of being just a research project as it had been at Yale, Kaleidoscope was actually used in university admissions. So all students had the option of completing Kaleidoscope essays. We had about 16,500 applicants per year, and roughly 2/3 of them chose the option. The essays were designed to measure creative, analytical, practical, and wisdom-based skills, as wisdom had now entered the theory. So a creative essay might be something like, suppose Germany had won World War II. What might the world be like today? Or take any event in history and say what the world would be like today if it had come out differently. Another creative type of essay was to choose a title for a story. For example, The End of MTV, or The Professor Disappeared, or The Mysterious Laboratory. And you would write a creative essay about it. A third type of creative item was you could draw something. You could draw a new product, or an advertisement for a new product, or a house, anything you wanted that would show your creativity. Or you could even, in the later years, submit a creative YouTube video. Examples of a practical item would be to write an essay telling us how you persuaded a friend of some idea that the friend did not initially accept. An example of a wisdom-based item might be to tell us how, as an adult, you'll be able to fulfill some passion you've had in high school in a way that would help to promote a common good. What we found in the Kaleidoscope project at Tufts was that first, Kaleidoscope increased performance of freshman year grade point average over what you would get from SAT plus high school grades alone. Second, it also predicted participation in meaningful extracurricular and leadership activities. Third, Kaleidoscope scores did not show ethnic group differences. Fourth, students really liked Kaleidoscope in that they felt it told the university things about them that they never could have figured out, the university could not have figured out, just on the basis of the standard application. And finally, Kaleidoscope served as a way to promote the university because it sent a message to high schools, to applicants, to parents, that Tufts University was not just interested in your academics, but in your future active citizenship and leadership potential as well. We had done Kaleidoscope for 5 years when I left Tufts to come to Oklahoma State University. And on June 1st, 2012, we're starting a project called Panorama, which will be similar to Kaleidoscope, but adapted for the much broader range of students who attend Oklahoma State University. So to conclude, when we think about college admissions, historically, in the United States and much of Europe and elsewhere, we have very much emphasized academic skills. But research my colleagues and I have done, as well as research other people have done, this research has shown that academic skills have some, but not a whole lot of predictive value for the kinds of successes you'll have in your later life. Not just financially, but in terms of whether you're somebody who's going to contribute to making the world a better place, whether you care about people beside yourself and those who are members of your group. So what we have undertaken in the 3 universities with which I've recently been affiliated is to change the way we think about admissions so that we look at not just knowledge and analytical skills with regard to the use of that knowledge, but also creative, practical, and wisdom-based skills. And if Trinity is interested in pursuing any of these ideas, I would be glad to help in any way I can. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you.